Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Genesee Country Village and Museum, hosting the Fiddle and Folk Festival, a weekend of music, craft, and community with 6 stages of live entertainment and folk music across the historic village, August 17th and 18th. Tickets at gcv.org.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Brian Sharp. Today's connection was made a couple of months ago when the Seneca Nation began exploring the possibility of buying the Rochester Nighthawks lacrosse franchise. The team was for sale and its future was very much uncertain. Fast forward to Tuesday, and the Senecas were announced as the new owners, making them possibly the first sovereign native nation to own a major professional lacrosse team, certainly in the history of the National Lacrosse League. This holds significance that goes deeper than a business deal, and we'll get into that. Joining me today are Seneca Nation President Jay Conrad Seneca, Nighthawks President and General Manager Dan Carey, and self-described superfan Eli Hackett. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks for having us, Brian.
I wanted to start at the beginning, and this is for President Seneca. I heard a lot of references yesterday to the Creator's Game, and I was hoping you could explain that to me.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, I guess. How are you today?
Good. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. The Creator's Game, the Creator gifted us this game in regards to back in history, at a time when, our people were maybe having some disagreements, or we needed a way to settle some issues. The Creator created a game that we now know as lacrosse, where our people would have participated in that and to settle disagreements or in event social kind of gatherings to bring people together as well. So this game was, brought forward in history to our ancestors and brought forward in history to where we are today. So we call it that. It's a medicine game. It's a game of healing. It helps. It's a big part of our life. It's a big part of our culture, who we are as a people. And when we play the game, we play it for the enjoyment of the Creator.
And is there, I was told that there's a very, maybe it's too long to get into on the air, but a longer story of how this began and how it was gifted.
Yeah, I'm sure, there is. So I don't know if I can get into that today, or certainly, we can do that down the road or whenever you want.
Okay. Well, Dan, you've been with the Nighthawks since 2019, but you're also a player in the league for several years. I'm wondering, when they announced this yesterday, the press release began, one of the most storied cities in National Lacrosse League history is entering a new era. Can you talk some about that history?
Yeah, so considering the city, the Nighthawks have been here since 1995. So from 95 up until 2019, they had, the old Nighthawks, which relocated to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and we started a new franchise in 2019, the new Nighthawks. That was an expansion team, and we've been here as this team and this franchise since then. So a lot of history within our league. Our league has been around for a long time, but there's been a handful of teams that have come and gone, and Buffalo and Rochester have both been two teams that have been kind of long-standing franchises. There's so much, there's the roots of the sport of lacrosse, obviously, from the creators and the Native American culture here that was kind of rooted in this Rochester area, but now the professional side of it, there's a ton of youth lacrosse, and the schools in Rochester, kind of top-notch programs. So there's a lot of lacrosse history within this area, and the Nighthawks have been here since 1995, and I think we have such a passionate fan base here that has been growing continually over the last 20 plus years, right? It's been a long time. So we're just excited to continue this, and I think it's such an amazing fit to have the Seneca Nation as the owners of the new Nighthawks.
And it's been, though, a tough summer. In June, the previous owners, the Pagulas, owner of the Amerks, the Bills, the Sabres, and the Bandits, you mentioned down the road, They announced they were done. They wouldn't be operating the team anymore. I think we have a clip, and this is from yesterday. We caught up with your star forward, Connor Fields, last year's league MVP, and he talked about the uncertainty from the player's perspective.
For us, after last season, it was uncertainty. We didn't know if there was going to be another season, with this team in this city, and that's at the end of the day was what we all wanted. We love playing together, and we love playing, in this city in front of these fans. So it was all hope in the summer, and credit to Commissioner and Dan. I think they both did a great job in not just finding an owner to own the team, they found the right owner, and I really feel like that's true. So we're just full of excitement, and it's how we hoped.
And Eli, I want to get you involved as well. As a fan, what has the summer been like? And what do you think about the direction of the team now?
It was really stressful for me and for a lot of the fans. Dan said that the original Nighthawks franchise was moved to Halifax, and that was a really big disappointment for a lot of the lacrosse fans in Rochester to see their beloved team get relocated. They were quickly followed up by the new Nighthawks, but for some people like me who are slightly newer fans, I wasn't there through that experience, but for some people they were seeing flashbacks of the original franchise leaving. So I had heard rumors, but there had been rumors before, and sometimes rumors have a crumb of validity, but sometimes they don't. And so it was hard to try to suppress feelings about what might happen when you don't know if there's any truth to a rumor or not. And I tried to just take a stance that was, I really hope they stay, and I'm going to try to be gracious if they do get relocated or moved, and trying to think about how that might change how I approach the league. I would probably either, if they were moved, I would probably just follow the team. If that meant they were in another city, I would probably just try to follow them as much as I could. Maybe get to some games in Buffalo or Toronto that are close, Albany. But it would have been, a pretty big bummer as a season ticket holder to go from getting to all their home games to maybe I'd make a home game once in the season,
And I should mention, Eli wrote a column for City Magazine, which is on newsstands now. And I'd like you had mentioned that, as a press time, we don't know. And hopefully by the time you're reading this, there's news.
Yep. Yeah. The thinking was that I was hearing was that a decision would probably have to get made by August 1st, just because that was at the time when the league's free agency was opening up. Now there's negotiations going on with the players and the owners of the league. That's ongoing, so that ended up delaying free agency by a couple weeks as it stands right now. So at the time that I was writing that, though, it was looking like a decision would probably have to be made by August 1st. So I thought that maybe by that time the article came out that people would know more than I did when I was writing it. And it was only a few days later that we got the official news.
And I want to play one more clip. This is from National Lacrosse League Commissioner Brett Frood. This deal came together quickly. I think President Seneca, we were talking yesterday, you had said that this began maybe mid-May with an initial idea of Seneca Nation being one of several investors. You wanted it to be a solo solo owner to control your own destiny. In this clip, Commissioner Frood talks about just the quickness of the deal.
These things don't happen overnight. I mean, typically you take a acquisition of a professional sports entity, and you're talking a year, maybe more. So the diligence and the details and just overall the rowing that took place from a number of folks, from the league level, folks up here, PSE, et cetera, in a 2-month time span was quite extensive. So really, we'll call it, I think, met with President Seneca a couple months ago, probably for the first time, maybe 2.5 months ago. And then we fast-tracked it very quickly. So a tedious process with a wonderful, ideal, utopian result.
And President Seneca, I know you've said that this just made sense, the history, the connections, but also that this is an outside-the-box idea for many. Now, I'm assuming you've gotten a look at the numbers, done your due diligence. You're a businessman. Why did this make business sense?
Well, I think it makes business sense in regards to the potential that we have as far as economic development in Rochester and the region. I think certainly, to get a foundation to build on, I think the Nighthawks, it's a great opportunity for anybody that's looking to get into business. And I think whatever happened in the past, the numbers that were there aren't Seneca Nation numbers. Those were a different owner, and different owners had different viewpoints and perspectives and ways of doing business. The business acumen that we have at Seneca Nation is geared in a different model. And so certainly we're going to incorporate the way we do things in Rochester there with the Nighthawks to make sure that we take the right steps, that we use our patience, and we make good decisions, and we create an atmosphere there where the fan base will grow and the revenues will be growing as well, and we do things the right way and pay attention to detail. Certainly you mentioned previous owners. They own several sports teams. You got the Bills, you got the Sabres, you got the Bandits, and so the Americans, and so there takes a lot of their attention. And maybe I don't know, but maybe they just didn't pay the attention that they needed to Rochester to get it to a point where it was successful. But we will. And we're determined to make that happen, and I believe we will.
I want to take that in multiple parts here, but I guess starting with Dan, is the team profitable right now?
I don't know how important or how I guess appropriate it is to get into the financials of it, but at this point, no. But that's the goal here. That's the process that we're looking at, and from my standpoint, President Seneca is 100% correct there. We're going to do everything the right way and make sure that we put all of our efforts into filling that building. We have a great product on the floor. Our team is in a really good position right now, very competitive. I think we're one of maybe 4 teams in the league that have made the playoffs the last 3 years consecutively. We're still fairly young. We've got a lot of experience ahead of us that we need to be one of those top tier teams, but I think we're right there, and that's a big component to it. That's an important aspect of the business, is making sure that you have a good product. Ultimately, by the time you walk into that building and by the time you leave, it should be a great experience. So enhancing certain aspects of our game and our game presentation are going to be an important part of it. But ultimately, just the advertising and the marketing and being a little bit more visible and noisy in our market to have people recognize and understand what we're doing. So, from our standpoint, this is a business. It's really important to us. We know that our fans have had a tough time over the last few 6-7 years to potentially lose the team. They got a new team coming in, and to have that announcement for us to no longer be operating the team. There's some uncertainty there, but this should be to me a great opportunity for fans to really jump on board and to support this team if they want to continue to have a professional lacrosse team, which I think there's a lot of people in our market that do. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure that this is a great product, and we're out in the market and do all that to make it a successful business.
And I wanted to just, with President Seneca, how important is profitability to the Seneca Nation on this venture? I mean, I know.
Yeah, it's important. It has to. It's certainly, if you're in business, you want to make money. You want to be able to be profitable. You want to be successful, and it is important. It's a priority, and I think I think it goes hand in hand with what's going on across the National Lacrosse League. The commissioner is certainly working hard in regards to creating a brand that is marketable across this country and across North America and the world, for that matter. You're able to watch professional box lacrosse now on ESPN, which is a big thing. You know, you can tune into it, you can follow teams and become a fan. So the growing of the fan base of the league will also influence the success of the teams that comprise the league. And we're excited to work with the league in regards to that, to do our part, to be able to build that brand and to continue to grow and be successful.
I got explained to me this morning that because I was seeing box lacrosse yesterday. Can one of you explain just to listeners who maybe aren't as familiar with the game box lacrosse versus field lacrosse?
Yeah, you know, well, Dan, you want to go for that?
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So field lacrosse is 10v10. So you've got 9 runners and a goalie, larger field. There's different rules that come into play, specifically the area of the field that players are allowed to play in. So you've got attack and defense. You've got to have a certain amount of players that stay on a certain line and a certain side of the field. There's different rules when it comes to the physical part of it, so cross-checking and slashing. It changes a little bit. There's some variants from the outdoor, from field lacrosse to box lacrosse. So box is played in a hockey arena and or lacrosse arena. So it's very similar to what you'd see hockey, kind of basketball. You've got 5-on-5 plus a goalie. The nets they're going to be smaller than hockey goals. And the rules, it's a faster pace. The rules are a little bit different. I think it's a little bit more physical. There's cross-checking and you know, there's a lot more contact in box lacrosse. I think part of that is it's a shorter, smaller playing surface, but also just the rules themselves. So there's a shot clock that's 30 seconds, so the pace of play is very quick. Players are changing on the fly, so you know, we've got primarily defensive players and offensive players. Some transition will stay and play both ways, but you know, for the most part, you've got these high-end, skilled offensive players that are, you know, playing offense, and they come off once we lose possession of the ball, and the defenders come out and take care of our own end. So it's quite a bit different, but the skills are very similar. You got, you know, a lot of transferable skills for box and field. A lot of the Canadians, that's what they grow up. They play box lacrosse. You know, I think a lot of the Native American culture and some of the territories and reservations have, you know, both, but I think there's a lot of box lacrosse being played in the majority of them as well. So I think the U.S. players, box lacrosse is growing. It hasn't been their primary game. It's been field, but there's a lot more players within the U.S. that are starting to play the box game. I think part of it is because of the NLL. It's there's an opportunity for them to play professionally, and they see that avenue as something they want to pursue. So very different in the rules and how the game is played, but there's a lot of similarities and transferable skills between both leagues, or both types of games.
So Eli, I wanted to talk to you, and then we're going to go back to President Seneca and Dan here on some of the things of what they want to do to grow fan. But I'm wanting to start with you as far as what drew you to the Nighthawks, to this game, and what has been your experience? You mentioned in your column that these last 6 years, 5 years, 6 years, there's always been that level of uncertainty given the multiple teams that were owned and that. But I'm just wondering your experience and what drew you to this.
Yeah, so for me, what drew me was really just chance. I was at an Amherst game with my wife and some friends, and someone in front of us was like, you know, have you ever checked out the Nighthawks? And I was like, nah, I've heard of them. I don't really know that much about it. He's like, you should check it out. They're rowdy. I was like, all right. So we went to our first Nighthawks game just kind of on a whim, on that guy's suggestion. We didn't realize it, but it was the Nighthawks were on a 5-game win streak. It was their first 5-game win streak, going into their 6th game against the Buffalo Bandits, and they had not. This franchise, the newer Nighthawks franchise, had not beat the Bandits yet. So on the line was extending to a 6-game win streak, and also beating the Buffalo Bandits for the first time. And Bandits fans travel, and so the Blue Cross Arena was pretty loud, pretty full, with a pretty strong contingency of Bandits fans as well. And it was just it was a rowdy atmosphere. It was a great game, and the Nighthawks came away with a win, extending to the 6-game win streak. And I was hooked from that point on.
What have you seen as far as just fan attendance, fan enthusiasm, folks that you talk to as you've gotten to really know this team, this fan base, this sport?
Yeah, I'd say there's probably like 3 levels of fans. There's the people that are pretty into it hardcore, like I am. I consume a lot of NLL content, podcasts and pundits and news. I'm on the NLL subreddit quite often, and I also follow box lacrosse outside of the NLL now, and lacrosse in general internationally. So there's fans like me that are really keeping up to date with players that are coming up to be into the professional league at college and in the Canadian Junior A system. And then there's fans that have season tickets, maybe even, and they go to a lot of the games. It's just something that they really enjoy, but they might not follow the stats and consume content outside of going to the games. And then there's a lot of people who go once in a while. They go with people like me. When I invite them, they have a really good time. So I would say that's kind of like the 3 levels of fans there.
Is there things you heard, I think President Seneca touch on, and Dan also wanting to grow that base? Is there things that you see or hear that's like, if we could do this, that could draw more people?
Yeah, for sure. In my experience, I mean, I've probably brought probably like 50 different people to their first Nighthawks games since I've been a fan. I've coordinated work outings and large friend group outings and stuff. And everybody that I've brought has a really good time. It's a really good, as he said, it's an incredible on floor product. I think what I see is just, I think in advertising, getting the word out, encouraging people to just give it a try, because I think people who give it a try end up really liking it. And beyond that, I think, I mean, I'm not a businessman. I haven't run a franchise, but I do think that maybe there's something to be said about targeting the colleges and universities in Rochester. I think, from what I understand, one of the things that's been really successful in Halifax, which is where the old Nighthawks got moved to, is they draw a really good college age crowd. There's several universities and colleges around Rochester, and the Nighthawks play in the winter when it's pretty cold and snowy. And I think tapping into the college age demographic would be a really strong move, especially in the winter when there's not a ton going on. So that's something I've thought might work.
We're going to take a break in a minute. I want to get one question in that came in here from YouTube, and then we want to go into more after the break of sort of maybe where folks are thinking of taking the organization and the fan experience. Question was, are there any thoughts about going back to the Nighthawks' original colors of purple and teal?
I think that's probably our most asked question, and President Seneca can jump in here. But for this season, we are going with our colors, our current color scheme with kind of that army and that olive green and black and gold. It's it's what the decision was made before I came in, and that was going to be the new colors. I think originally the organization wanted there to be some kind of difference between the old organization and the current, new franchise. But we're listening. We're going to take notes, and we're going to do what we think is best, and ultimately have the fan voice be something that we consider and listen to. I do have my opinions on it. I'm sure President Seneca has his as well, and other members of the nation and their council. So there's going to be a lot of discussion on that, and ultimately we want this to be something that everybody in the community is proud of. There is a sense, when you're running a business, you can't make everybody happy, and there's going to be a lot of suggestions that come in, but that's pretty consistent one that we have. What I want to see is, no matter what colors we have, people support us. There's pro sports teams across the North America that if you're in that market and that's your team, you just grab onto it and whatever it is. So, instead of looking back at what it used to be, like understanding that this is important to a lot of people, getting on board with whatever we're choosing to do. But we are going to listen. People have a voice, and we want to. It's for the fan experience. It's for our players. It's that sense of pride that you want in your logo and colors and all that. So we have listened. We're going to consider everything right now this year. We have a team that's ready to get on the floor in late November, early December, and this is the jersey and the color that we're going to go with. If we're going to make that change, then we're going to be discussing that over the next couple of months. But I'll let President Seneca jump in if he'd like.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Yeah, I think he said it right. We have our listening ears on. I think, for me in government, certainly listening to the people's suggestions and their ideas and their input. We incorporate that too in business. I think we have to listen to the customer, the fan base, in regards to what they're looking for and what they like. And, what package they like to see. It's all about, a lot of times in business, it's packaging. And so, we'll definitely pay attention to that, and we'll discuss those things in a roundtable sessions that we'll be having here in the next couple of months in regards to the direction we go with that. Myself, I like the old Nighthawks colors. I used to go there when they had them. They were good. But, I'm a military guy too. I'm a former Air Force, and so I kind of like the olive drab as well. It's kind of, good stuff. I think, everything's possible. And I think in today's sports world, a lot of teams, they're not stuck on just one jersey or color like it used to be. I remember when I was a kid, they always just had one thing, and that's the way it did. The uniforms and jerseys are very diversified today in today's sports world. So I think there's opportunity to be able to have a few different flavors of team colors. And so we look forward to that. It's exciting stuff.
All right. Well, we're going to take that break. As you heard, they're listening. If there's lots of ways to connect, we got a caller on the line. If you hold on to the other side of the break, lots of ways to connect. You can call 844-295-8255 or 585-263-9994. Email us connections@wxxi.org or comments on YouTube. And we will take the break and be back with more about what fans can expect after this.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Bob Johnson Auto Group, proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson. Believing an informed public makes for a stronger community. BobJohnsonAutoGroup.com.
I'm Evan Dawson, host of Connections. I'm taking a little break this summer, but that doesn't mean Connections is going away. My colleague, WXXI's Raquel Stephen, will be hosting the first hour of the show over the summer. She'll bring you the same long-form conversations, in-depth exploration of issues, and variety of content that you're used to hearing. In the second hour each day, we'll bring back some of our and your favorite conversations from the show. It all begins the week of July 14th on Connections.
All right, we are back. We do have a caller on the line, Tim from Illinois. And do you have a question?
Hey, guys. Yeah, so this is Naber. Hey, Dan.
Naber, how are you?
Great. Seeing you guys yesterday. I'm going to try and get through this. Yesterday I did a lot of crying. Very happy. But so I've been to every announcement ever since '94 when Steve Donner actually called me and he's like, "Hey, you think this will work?" I've been to Bandit season ticket holder, and I'm like, "Absolutely, Ross, sure would be awesome." Yesterday was the first one I've ever missed. I was going to fly in from Chicago. I really wanted to. I just couldn't. I would be there for the season opener. I promise. Anyway, a couple of quick questions. Running the fan crew, the Nighthawks crew for 30 years, you guys have always been a great support system, and I've left it in great hands. There's 3 women who have been Nighthawks fans for a long time. They're going to take it over and run with it. Very excited for them to work with the new management. In 94, 95, there was a real focus on bringing local guys to the team. Some of the guys from like Naz, who had just won some national championships a few years earlier, Schiller from Penfield, Fairport, Pseudo, a lot of the guys, Reggie from Spencer or Syracuse even. Is there any type of new focus to try to get not only local guys, because obviously there's a lot of talent out there, but I'd like to see that focus back on not only Western New York, but a native presence that I think we've kind of been missing for a few years. And the second question is there any chance of getting a Hiawatha flag both in the arena and on a flagpole outside permanently?
Yeah, I can.
I'll take that one. Certainly. The talent pool in the native world, we have great talent. I think you look at the different universities in the area where our members of our nations go and play. They're in the University of Albany, Syracuse, Cornell. You name it. They're all around the area. Rochester, Buffalo, and so. Yeah, I think, and across the country, I know there's lots of native talent, and so we'll be looking at that for sure. And, I think as far as getting the Hiawatha flag there, one was in the arena yesterday, and the Seneca Nation flag as well. And so we expect, those things to be there, and certainly I do anyway, and I know they will be, so. Go ahead, Dan, you had something?
Yeah, I agree with that. When it comes to players, Naber, from my standpoint, and President Seneca and I have had this conversation already. I think it's really important to be looking at local talent, right? And we've got now that connection with the Native American community that's close by, but otherwise, there's others that are all over the place that are great players. I want to just make sure that we have a great product on the floor and players that are fitting our culture, what we want to do with our locker room, able to help enhance our performance on the floor. We've had local Rochester players that we've targeted and we've looked at, and there's some great players within our league that, are members of the Seneca Nation and Native Americans and Rochester-based players. It doesn't always work out in our favor that those players are going to be able to play for us, but I think there's the huge importance of that, and it's something that we've always discussed. Anytime we go in through the draft or free agency, if there's two players that are equal, and one is based in Rochester, it just makes sense. We have a community here that is tied into some of these players, and ultimately this is a business, and we want to make sure we're drawing people to the building. But at the same time, we want to make sure we're as competitive as we possibly can be. And if those players fit, what we want to do here, then I think, if all things are equal, that it just seems to make sense for us. So I think, targeting players a little bit more than we have is something that, I'd like to see and like for us to do. It's always important to be tying in the communities within our team and the culture of our team. So, definitely, we share that and we feel the same way as wanting to see more of those guys here, and ultimately, part of the process when it comes to acquiring talent.
I want to jump off of that with, on the team, President Seneca, you said yesterday, your words, I think generally Dan, is going to be allowed to run the team as he sees fit, but will have some input as well. And I'm just curious along these lines, how you both see this relationship working. But President Seneca, where you hope to have that influence? Is it in the style of play? Is it in the recruiting? Is it in the fan experience, or how you describe sort of the party atmosphere there? Where do you see wanting to influence things and have that input?
I think on the outset, I think we have to be involved in all of those types of things. We have to be able to sit at the table and have that discussion and have an open dialogue in regards to the ideas and the thoughts that we have in regards to moving in the right direction, and putting those things in place to make sure that we're successful in all aspects of the game, whether it's players on the field, whether it's the financial part of it, whether it's marketing, advertising, the fan base, making sure that we're involved in community, that we're out in the public, that we're engaging with the schools, the colleges. You draw a big circle around Rochester, go out 100 miles or so. That's where we got to concentrate on, and to be able to encourage people to come be involved and be a part of the Nighthawks. And that's what we're looking for, and that's what we want to do. Like going back to the last question too, there's so much talent that is out there, native and non-native, to be able to bring into the city of Rochester, into the Nighthawks, Southern Ontario, Quebec, New York, just in that whole region is just great. You got the top schools in the country in lacrosse with Cornell, #1, and Syracuse. We have the Haudenosaunee Nationals that are right now getting ready to go over to the under-20 team, going over to South Korea for a tournament. And then you also have, the nationals that we're gearing up to go to, men and women, gearing up to go and compete at the Olympics in Los Angeles. So the world's focus Rochester is going to be in the center of focus of lacrosse just because of that, because of the Haudenosaunee Nationals, and also now that the Seneca Nation is involved and owner of the Rochester Nighthawks, I'm sure that's going to be something as well that people will be talking about. And we got to make sure they're talking about it.
And that's about how do you capitalize on that beyond advertising? We've seen programs and efforts. You go back to Donner's years where he would discount tickets or even give away tickets just to get people into the stadium. And then there was a whole conversation about devaluing the ticket. But I'm wondering how you go about beyond the marketing, getting that word out, getting those folks into the stands, making them season ticket holders, or not making them, getting them to be season ticket holders. If you've gotten those discussions and how you do that.
No, I think it's engagement. I think it's getting yourself out into the community and being a part of it. And, I think you get response from that. And, utilizing all the tools that you have in regards to, reaching out to organizations, out to schools, colleges, community to make it happen. I think, back in the earlier day of my life, I was a salesperson. I used to work for the Buffalo Bisons. And I was a group salesperson, and back in the day when telemarketing was a big thing. And, I was able to, I learned a lot in those jobs that I had back when I was younger. And to be able to reach out and to get people to come into the stadium, watch a baseball game. I also worked for the Buffalo Stallions. I don't know if you remember that. They were an indoor soccer team in Buffalo. And, I worked for them, and, we did very well in a group sales, telemarketing scenario out there. So I think, we use any and everything that we can do, every advantage, every tool in our toolbox to be able to reach out to people. And I think moving around, Dan and I talked about it yesterday, a lot of our territories have arenas on their territory. Being able to get out and do exhibition or to hold a training facility or training and engagement with youth organizations, that's where you get it, because that's who's going to come to the game. Like the gentleman earlier said about the different levels of fan base. I think the other level is the family component. Families coming out to the game, kids that play in sports. And for them to introduce them maybe to lacrosse, maybe they don't know about it, maybe they're just learning. But you introduce that and you get that family, because it's all about family too with youth sports, because the moms and the dads have to take the kids to practice, take them to the games, and so it's a family thing. And the Nighthawks should be a family also orientated based place where families can come, enjoy the product on the field, enjoy the game, and the entertainment within the arena, and just the atmosphere, I think, is going to be great. So, I think all of that is something that we need to focus on and work on.
Yeah, just to add to that, and Eli mentioned it earlier, so, looking at the different levels of fans, there's a lot of people within the Rochester community that are non-fans. They don't know anything about the Nighthawks. So that is that marketing aspect and the promotional side of it, and getting out in the public and getting out within the community to make people aware that there's, a professional lacrosse team here, and it's exciting and it's a great fan experience. Like President Seneca said, it's a family atmosphere, but Eli mentioned earlier about the college crowd, like everybody can be entertained, like anybody who if you're a concert goer, if you like NASCAR, if you like the NBA, it doesn't matter. I think the NLL is something for everybody. So there's levels of different type of people that are going to be entertained within that building and that game, turning those non-fans into casual fans and those casual fans into season ticket holders. And that's the avenue. That's what we want to get to. And sometimes you turn a non-fan into a season ticket holder and they skip that casual fan base because they just get hooked on it, right? So for us, we need people advocating for this team that are within the community. And, I don't feel like doing it on a Saturday night, but I'm going to go give this a shot. And Eli mentioned it earlier. There isn't one person that I've ever met, and I'm biased, and I'm in a position to have been since a player to, management. nobody has ever told me that they haven't enjoyed that experience. I don't think I've ever heard that. It's just anybody that goes to one of these games loves it, and they might not turn into a season ticket holder because of their schedule and everything else they got going on. But there's a lot to be done. But it's a great experience, and we want to make sure that we get that to as many people as possible to have them, experience it for the first time if they haven't already.
And I want to go back here before we run out of time, just sort of to where we started. That this is also there's a particular, I think someone called it poignant, but a special connection here, particularly for lacrosse and America's oldest team sport. I was, reading yesterday, but I want to go back to Nighthawks player again, Connor Fields, and he talked some about that history, the culture. His time playing for the Seneca War Chiefs, and all of that coming together.
I played junior B lacrosse when I was younger on the Seneca Nation, actually, for the Seneca War Chiefs. So, I was very familiar with the meaning of the game, the medicine game, and how it should be played, playing it the right way. So, I was lucky enough to be introduced to that at a young age, and I credit playing for the Seneca War Chiefs for a lot of where I am today and who I am as a player today. So, to hear all that and to hear President Seneca talking, you could tell that they really do care about the game itself and the growth of the game and playing the game the right way. And they want to win, right? And that's all the things we want too. So just to hear that from your new owner is very exciting.
And jumping off of that, we had touched base on this yesterday, but just how is that reflected in your locker room and in your team now, the culture and the history? And I guess for for everybody here, how you see the possibilities of both expanding on that and using this opportunity to educate and bring people in to that deeper connection.
I feel within our group there's always been a connection to it, but to bring that a little bit more and a little bit more visibility to it and educational aspect of it for our players, it just adds. Our guys are so passionate about the game of lacrosse and they love it. And these guys, they're professional, but it's not to the level of the compensation that these other leagues are getting. So these guys, there's a true love for this game for our players and staff and everybody involved. We have people that just want to be part of the team, and they're doing whatever is needed, during a game day to make sure that this runs smoothly. So, but I think there's such a great opportunity for us to, within our ownership and educating our players to have them fully understand the importance of it is going to be good for us. Like, that's a great thing. And, I feel like I have a really good handle on that myself. And, I've had some teammates over the years that have helped with that. As a young player, we played against, teams in Six Nations in Brantford, Ontario, and you see, you can just see it and how important the game is to them. And it was to us as well, but it's just different. So I think bringing that into it and finding opportunities for, whether it's President Seneca or members of the nation or the council to be kind of educating us and bringing certain things within our team, because it's a game, but it's also a lot more to a lot of people. And I think that can help us. That's going to be good for our locker room and our culture.
President Seneca, I'm wondering how important, when you look for players, and I don't know how hands-on you expect to be, but that understanding of the history and the culture, is that something that's going to be front and center in recruiting, or how do you see that being built up?
I think culture is going to play a main role and component of what we do. And it's just who we are and the way we do things. It's an important thing, and it's a part of an education process. I think on a government level, and my travels that I do to Albany and Washington, Native history, Seneca history, Haudenosaunee history. There's not a lot of people who are knowledgeable in regards to that, and I think it can go a long way to building relationships when people know who we are, what we're about, and what we believe in, and the way we live our lives and the things that are important to us, our value system. Even from the game of lacrosse, the ability for lacrosse to be that bridge to be able to bring people together and to educate people in regards to something maybe they never really thought about or learned about when they were growing up or even when they're young. I think there's a lot to learn about Native people and Native nations. And so I'm really excited about that opportunity and to be able to bring that to the people through the Rochester Nighthawks.
I want to stay with you a minute here, too, as we spoke, I think, for the first time several months ago, ahead of, at that time, when you had asked for, and you've since welcomed Governor Hochul for an apology from the state on the Thomas Indian School. We talked before about all the different areas that you wanted attention to: public safety, environmental, economic development, unkept promises, unpassed agreements. We've seen some movement on some of those. I'm wondering where this fits into that. Was this a detour, or does this fit along the way in sort of the 10,000-foot view, the bigger picture?
No, certainly since I've been president and my times on the council, I've always believed that engagement, developing relationships with leadership within New York, whether it's the executive chamber or in the legislature, or whether it's in Congress down in Washington or the White House, we have to be on a continued process of engagement and education, because things change so much within those places in the legislature and Congress that new people come in and they really don't know. So we're always on the educational, tour, you want to call it, and making sure that they know who we are, where we are. A lot of times I go to Albany, we have to take a map. If you can imagine this, that within the state of New York, if you're going into the legislature, some people don't even know where the Seneca Nation is. It's kind of like what Dan said. People in Rochester don't even know about the Nighthawks. And so it's all about education, and we have to go in and make sure they know our issues, make sure they know who we are, where we are, and our history. And so, that's all about it. And, we were, been working on a lot of different initiatives. And Rochester, the region in Rochester and that whole central New York, central area, and a part of our Aboriginal territory, we've been planning a summit like I had a summit here in Western New York with a delegation here in Western New York. We've been to Albany a couple of times doing Seneca Impact Day, educating and being present, being seen and being heard. And then we're planning the same thing also within the Rochester region down at Ganondagan, down near Victor. And so, this kind of accelerated that, I guess, in a way that this opportunity came and was on my lap, and it's like, hey, this is an opportunity for us to get into business. It's an economic development, and also it's an opportunity for us to build relationships also with the community and with a spot within our Aboriginal territory that we've been working on. And so I think the Creator works in different ways. We never know what's going to happen, and I always say that the Creator directs our steps and brings us opportunities when we don't see it coming, and then there it is, and so here we are, and now we're the new owners of the Rochester Nighthawks, which is just a great thing, and very grateful for that.
Well, we're almost out of time. I want to go around the table and just, if there's other thoughts, either speaking to the fans or the public of just what the last 24 hours have been like for each of you since the announcement, and just what you've been hearing, or again, just things that you'd want to say to folks who are listening. You can start.
Can I start?
Yeah,
Okay. It's been a fantastic process over the last, I guess, couple of months from my standpoint. Just so thankful and grateful that for President Seneca and the nation to be, taking ownership of this team. That means a lot to so many people, everybody within our organization, but obviously, sitting beside Eli here as a season ticket member, and our fans and the community that really care so deeply for this. So that needs to grow. We want to continue to push that. Commissioner Frood mentioned it yesterday on the support that we need to make this successful. So we're excited. RochesterNighthawks.com is where you can go and buy a season ticket, and we're taking deposits right now. We're rounding out our staff to help with that and make sure that we're going to be putting ourselves in a great position to have success. So we're excited, and I appreciate you having us on.
Thank you. And Eli, just what have you been hearing from fans?
The fans are excited. The vibes are high. I think the fans feel that this new ownership is an ownership that cares about lacrosse and is going to be invested in lacrosse in Rochester. I'm not going to talk bad about the Pegulas, but the Pegulas.
There was some boos yesterday when their name.
There were some boos. Nighthawks were a line item. On their business plan. It filled slots at the Blue Cross Arena when they were managing it. But I don't think any of the fans ever came away with the feeling that the Pegulas cared specifically about the Nighthawks or about lacrosse really in general. So to have owners that have played lacrosse who have already been ingrained in the lacrosse culture and that care about this area is going to be huge. And I think the fans are also extremely excited to have a sovereign nation own a team in this league. It's very cool.
And President Seneca, not much time. I want to give you the last word.
Yesterday, I just enjoyed so much meeting a lot of the fans that came to the event and their passion for the game. And so I hope that passion spreads throughout the region. And I look forward to seeing everybody at the arena on opening night when the Nighthawks open their season. So be there. Don't you dare miss it.
All right. President Seneca, President Carey, and Eli, thank you very much for your time. This is Connections, WXXI.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio.